you doing? It's Doc Vinyl again. That's the way you need it, any way you want it. Yep, you guessed it. We're doing Journey. Now, the interesting part about Journey, we're going to do about the evolution of the band. We're going to talk a little bit about Journey and what's going on and how they decided to become Journey, where they came from a little bit. But I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that, and I'm not going to do a complete discography. I'm only going to do 9 albums. Be frank about it. The later stuff I'm just not a big fan of. Arnel Pineda and Fleischman and other singers. I'm going to talk about the pre-Steve Perry days, which are kind of very interesting because they're generally overlooked. And then talk about, of course, the impact of Steve Perry in the band. And we'll talk about where they went and how the band changed. Because it was really 2 different bands, really. We'll see that. So, let's talk about Journey, guys. All right. Now, first of all, the band was formed from another band, which is interesting. I don't want to talk too much about this, but the evolution of Journey comes from another band called Santana, a very successful Latin band that had been playing rock and roll since 1969. 2 of the founding members of Journey were from Santana. First of all, we'll start with Greg Rowley, who was the keyboard player in Santana, who started with Carlos Santana and played a lot of the big hits. First album, Abraxas, Black Magic Woman, Oye Como Va, all the big songs. Greg Rowley's keyboards are right in there. So this is a talented, seasoned musician in a successful band. By the third album, a young guitarist comes along, 17 years old, named Neil Sean, who's really a prodigy. He's playing with Carlos Santana, does a lot of the compositions, and plays on a couple of the albums. Very good guitarist, very good influence, but they decide by 1974 that this is not where they want to go. They want to go in a different direction, so Greg Rowley and Neil Sean decide to form a band. And this is really the beginning of Journey. Now, here's a story about the band, which is interesting, because it's just Greg Rowley on keyboards and sings, and Neil Sean on guitar. Now they needed a drummer, bass player, and what have you, and another rhythm guitarist. So they looked for a drummer, and the drummer in the San Francisco area that had actually signed up and said, hey, I'll try it out, he'd taken the hiatus from the Tubes, was Prairie Prince. Amazing drummer. Now he had tried out, and he was in the band for a short period of time when they were putting together a demo tape, but then he had left and went back to the Tubes. So now they were left with a dilemma, who's going to play drums? So they went out and found a nice British drummer who had been playing with Frank Zappa at the time, again, California man, a British drummer named Ainsley Dunbar. Very good drummer, solid rock and roll. So now they get Ainsley Dunbar. Then they found Ross Valerie and George Tickner. George Tickner was a rhythm guitarist that joined the band, and Ross Valerie joins the band as bass player. So now you get Journey. It's a 5-man band. And what kind of music is this band going to play? Well, they're going to play prog, progressive rock style, and that's what had been dominant at the time. So the first album comes out in 1975, and it's just labeled Journey. Great album. I mean, we're looking at some really solid music here. But the problem with this is that it was in the heyday of progressive rock. So we're looking at a band here that's competing with some of the big mega progressive rock bands at the time. And let's name them. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Genesis. Yes, those are the big 3. Then we get into other bands, American progressive rock bands that were very popular on the scene in 75. Kansas, Styx. So Journey was just another band that was going the prog route. The difference is the material was good, and I do love this album, mind you. Much different, great guitar work, great keyboard work, some good instrumentals, really some good stuff on this. Side 1's got Of a Lifetime, In the Morning Day, really good. To Play Some Music, Topaz is amazing guitar. It's really good, but it's not good enough. I hate to say it. If it came out maybe at another time, it might have done better, but it was competing against some of the best prog rock of the period. And when I do prog rock, we'll talk about that. Good stuff. But it did well enough that Columbia that signed them decided to do another album. Now, George Tickner left after this album because he had some creative differences and he wanted to go in a different direction. I think he wanted to go back to medical school and what have you. So he had left the band. And their second album comes out in 1976, and it's called Look Into the Future. And this is a 4-man setup, as you can see by the cover there. This weaned down to Ross Valerie, Ainsley Dunbar, Greg Rowley, and Neil Sean. This album attempts to make more lyrical and may try to write a hit. This album was kind of, out of the first 3 albums, the biggest failure, I think, because it's some good stuff. They do On a Saturday Night, which is trying to go for the hit. It kind of missed. It doesn't really have the hooks and the rhythmic hooks and the melodic hooks that people really need at the time. Anyways, okay. Then they do a couple of instrumentals on this that are pretty good. Into the Future, When Midnight Dream, of course, the title track, Look Into the Future. Not bad. Again, it's a decent track, but the problem is it's disappointing sales. It doesn't even do as well as their first album, and Columbia is a little concerned at this point. Now, their third album Comes out in 1977. And again, same four-man crew. And this album's called Next. I love looking at these albums with these guys. Look at their hair and those clothes and everything. I love it. This is, again, Neil Schon, Ross Valerie, Greg Rowley, and Ainsley Dunbar. Great stuff. This is actually a little bit, this harkens back to the first album. So I figure we were a little successful in the first album. So this one with Spaceman on the first side, People, I Would Find You, Hustler, really good guitar stuff, Karma. I really like this album. Okay, this period I like. It's some great progressive rock, but I can understand why it wasn't competitive against what was really the mega progressive rock hits at this time period. And also, it didn't have a frontman, didn't have a singer, didn't have the hook to catch the audience. So we're looking at, lots of albums here that's like, not the sales that Columbia wanted to see. And Columbia was frankly disappointed with the release of this album. And they were like, okay, you need to do something. And they wanted some hits. And remember, FM radio at this time, you needed some hits. They couldn't be long. You couldn't do 9-minute noodlings and instrumentals. They weren't there. They needed a hook song hitter. So they needed a frontman. So they decided to get a frontman. Need a little drink there, sorry. And they decided to get a frontman. And the frontman they decided to get was Steve Perry. Now, I can go in the process of how they selected him, but they had different people and whatever, but I'm not going to waste your time with that. Steve Perry was a nice Portuguese boy from San Francisco Bay Area. They found him. He put in a demo tape and pretty good stuff. They liked his voice, amazing voice. I like Steve Perry, okay, personally. I think he's great, but I also think he's a positive and a negative. He was a definite positive for the band in the direction that they went, but he's also a negative because then he becomes this kind of overladen kind of, I'm going to dominate the band, this is what we're going to do thing. But I'll talk a little bit about that later. So, the first album with Steve Perry on it is 1978. This is a great album, and it's called, this one's called Frontiers. And this is a very good album right here, as you can see. This has the traditional four-man setup with Steve Perry. Okay, so we have Ross Valerie, Ainsley Dunbar, Neil Schon, and Greg Rowley. Now, this album right away takes Journey into a different journey. Love it. Sorry about the pun. This gets them into a completely different situation here because we're looking at, first of all, they have a hit, Wheel in the Sky. One of the first big hits of this album. And then the other one is Lights. Those are two big radio songs that come out. Now, both Wheel in the Sky and Lights are co-written by Neil Schon, Greg Rowley, Ross Valerie, and Steve Perry. Steve Perry is now involved. He's a frontman. His voice is really a hook, and this really puts them on the charts. This album does much better than the first three albums. Columbia is happy. They're like, wow, this is great. This is the kind of music we're looking for. This is what we need. This is what they were looking for to inject thing. Now, here's the good and bad. Okay? This is when Journey changes. Okay? I like this album, don't get me wrong. I think it's a great album. But Infinity has its problems because what we see now is that we now become a victim of our own success. We need a hit, and Journey becomes a hit machine. Now, they do it well. They write great songs, but they lose their prog rock roots. But they do write some great songs with some good instrumentals. The next album that comes out in 1979 is Evolution. Now, Evolution's a little different. We have some problems by the time we get to Evolution, because with Evolution, Ainsley Dunbar, the drummer, had really kind of cut his teeth on playing, progressive rock. He played with Frank Zappa, he played with all these other people. He wants to jam. He wants to be heard. He's a drummer. He's in your face. They didn't want that. The front man is Steve Perry. This is a collective group. We're writing hits. Ainsley Dunbar didn't fit in, so he left the band. And the new drummer was Steve Smith, a jazz musician from Berklee School of Music. Great guy, great drummer, great story. So now you have a new lineup of Steve Perry, Ross Valerie, Neil Schon, Greg Rowley, and Steve Smith. Now this album is a little as successful as Infinity, but the difference is with this album, Evolution has a couple of different songs on it. This has their big hit on this one was Lovin', Touchin', Squeezin', which was really popular. City of Angels was good. Lovin' You Is Easy. You could see the direction the band was going on. This was definitely radio hits, love songs, kind of like we want to. And the melodic hooks that they were writing into the music was good, but they weren't proggy. They weren't changes. They stayed within the process of solid rock. And with Steve Smith as a drummer, which is interesting, a jazz-oriented drummer, who's like, hey, They knew which side their bread was buttered on, and they knew which side they wanted to make money. So they decided that they're going to go with the hits, and that's exactly what they do in 1979. Now, by 1980, their third album comes out, and one of my personal favorites. I really like their third album a lot. Their third album is Departure. And, what did I say right there? Departure. Amazing album. I love the back. Look at the back. Look at the back. I love that. Look at that. So cool. That's what I love about albums. You can, big pictures. You can see them. I mean, oh my God. Look at that. I mean, it's like you pull out the picture sleeves that you don't even get, and then the whole thing. This album has the song I started the show with, "Any Way You Want It," which was a mega hit. This really put them on it. This has "Walk Like a Lady" on it. This has "I'm Crying," "Good Morning Girl," "Homemade Love." This now really starts to put them in the hit maker machine. Now they needed hits on every album. Now, this is the last album with Gregg Rolie in it, who was the founding member, who was really, one of the driving forces. And what I loved about Gregg Rolie is that he could sing duets with Steve Perry. But they had some problems that Gregg Rolie wanted to leave, and he leaves the band, and he recommends his replacement in the next album, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But this is really the last of the old style of Journey, from prog, from the first three albums I talked about, to the Steve Perry days. After this album, the next album was major. We're going to talk about in a minute. Changes the whole trajectory of the band. Okay, in 1981, we get one of their biggest albums, and that, of course, is Escape. Escape comes out, and this is loaded with hits. Jonathan Cain is a hit-making writer. He's the type of guy that writes a lot of hits in. We have "Don't Stop Believing," of course, probably one of the biggest songs. "Stone in Love," "Keep on Running," great song. "Escape," "Open Arms." I mean, this was loaded with hits. This put Journey on the map. A lot of people that had heard of Journey a little bit here and there, this now made them a mega band, stadium rock band. We're going to see this band, Journey. You see them in movies. "Don't Stop Believing." Adam Sandler loves that song. This is kind of a mixed success, this album, okay? This makes them a lot of money and makes them famous, but it also starts to determine where this band is going to go. This band was no longer the Journey that we love and, this is, fun to do. No, Columbia was like, we want hits. This is money, big bucks. Of course, that's one of the problems they have today with Journey. So the band now consisted of different members. Let me show you that. Actually, I'll show you the new members. The new members are here. I love the way they do this. That's what I love about albums. We have Steve Perry, Jonathan Cain on keyboards and vocals, Ross Valerie, Steve Smith, and Neil Schon. Of course, Neil Schon being the founder. With Gregg Rolie's departure, we definitely have a distinct, separate difference in where this band is going. Now, the next album that comes out, 1983, is Frontiers. Great album. This album, of course, has the big hit on Separate Ways, Send Her My Love. Again, it's doing the same thing that their other albums are doing. It was producing hits, and that's what they needed. A good album, solid album. One of the last albums that I really, really like. This is the period of Journey that I call The End. And as you can see here, the members all in parachutes, kind of cool little thing. We have Steve Perry, Neil Schon, Jonathan Cain. Now, this really... This, again, more radio hits, and Journey was really now the mega band that it had been. It really surpassed a lot of the other bands. It's no longer the prog roots that it had are long gone. They use their instrumentations to make good songs, but that's long gone. So by the time we get to the end of the road for the Journey, by one of the last albums, they're the same setup of Cain, Schon, Perry, Smith, is raised on radio. And of course, this comes out after in 1986. This was a big hit. Again, this one had a bunch of hits on it. Girl Can't Help It, of course. Be Good to Yourself. I'll Be All Right Without You. Again, hits. Frankly, I think this album really starts to show the trajectory of where Journey's going, away from its roots. We're here to write hits. We're here to write top 40 music. But music had been changing by 1986, and Journey... After this album, Journey starts to fall apart. We have some problems in La La Land, and we have problems with Steve Smith and others, and frankly, just not working out the way they did. I'm not going to go much past Raised on Radio because the band changes in different directions. Steve Perry comes back, and then another singer sings a couple songs. They have the singer come in, and then they have Arnel Pineda, the Filipino person that sings just like him. They find him, and then he's in the band now, and it just becomes this whole mess of who was in the band and who's in the band, and how much money we're making, and it really became, frankly, about money. It's like sports. It sucked the life out of it for me. The Journey now, after that, it's just about money and how many hits we sell, and 1980s music is popular now, and and Don't Stop Believing. How many millions of dollars can I make on selling this and putting it in movies? So no. So now, let's get to my favorite part of the show and talk a little bit about the Impact Journey. Now, they obviously were a big band. A lot of people liked them. And they did meld, their early stuff melded progressive with popular, and they did some good stuff. So I'm going to do my countdown in the last couple minutes of the show. I'm going to do my countdown from top to bottom. And let's talk a little shout out now that we have, coronavirus and we're all in our houses and being, locked in. I'm going to do a couple more drops. I'm going to do The Police and a couple other bands, but I'd like to, talk about everyone. Keep safe out there. You know what I mean? Don't, don't do anything silly and stupid and, start hugging and kissing everybody like that NBA guy touching stuff. But yeah, I'd like to shout out for Max J Records. He's officially closed until April 7th, hopefully. And but you can still get a discount online. The Journey stuff will be there. This video will be on Max J Records and on Facebook. So please subscribe, or please definitely get a like and get us going here. It'll be really good. Now let's do my top-down count, and then I'll end up the show there. All right, now out of these 9 albums, I have a preference, obviously, and I'm just going to give you mine, and I want to hear yours in your comment section. You don't have to agree with me. Of course, that's the whole thing about this show, that you can't agree. Not everyone's going to love the same thing. Worst to best. Okay, let's start with this one. No one's going to agree with me. But out of these 9 albums, Raised on Radio. To me, this is the band going in a different direction. It's got a couple of good hooks in it, but it's just not for me. I found this is scaring away. So this is the worst. So I put that one there. So then we go into the next album that I think is their second album, Look Into the Future. This is a little bit of weak. It's not bad, but it's a little weak album. It's not my favorite of their prog years, of the 3 prog rock albums. This was kind of so that's not my favorite. And then down for number 7 is Evolution. Evolution, it seems like it hits in some areas and it doesn't. This is the first album with Steve Smith on it. I get that, and it's kind of cool, but some of the songs are just, I don't know. I'm sorry, they're sappy. There's a couple of good jam songs in it. Neil Sean does some good writing with Greg Rowley, but I'm not impressed with this one. This one just, out of those Greg Rowley years, not my favorite. Now we're going to come down to the next album that I, is, of course, this one, of course, is Infinity. And this one's okay, good. This is the first Steve Perry album. I like it. I liked some of the songs on it, but it has 2 or 3 good songs on it, and then it has some good hooks, some good guitar work, great Greg Rowley keyboards on it. I love the melodics in it, but then it starts to fall apart. There's some real filler on this album, which I'm not particularly keen on, and it's all right. I think it's better than Evolution, but again, I think it's also it's also kind of a transitional album because it's the first album with Steve Perry, so I can understand that. So that's my next one. Now we're getting down to the top 4, top 5. The next album I have to say is Frontiers. I like Frontiers, but not my favorite album. It has one of the good songs on it, Separate Ways, I really like, and Send Her My Love, really good. And then I do like Rubicon and Frontiers is a good song too. But then there's this album has a couple of songs on it I'm not too keen on. I like it, but I can see the direction it was trying to do. The one thing I don't like about it is that this album has a distinct shadow upon it from Escape. Because the Escape album was so successful, they were trying to do the same thing here. In some areas they missed. Some they didn't, but some they missed. And this album really shows that legacy. All right, next one down. Now, next one I get into is Next. I like Next a lot, but the problem is that this album is really what I like about it. I love the jamming in it. I mean, this out of the prog albums, this is one of my favorites. Not the best one, but one of my favorites. I like it. But I can see the pressure that the band is under, and they're trying to write a couple songs, but it's also kind of a Neil Sean, like, I'm gonna do my thing. But I do like it. It's a good album. It's solid. But again, you're comparing it to the golden age of prog rock, and it's kind of hard to do with other bands. So in that formula, it's not as good as their first album, but it's a close damn second. All right, now we're gonna get down to the top 3. You may not agree with this, but okay. Number 3 is Escape. I love Escape. Don't get me wrong. A lot of high school songs in here. Don't Stop Believing, Open Arms, School Dances, Everyone remembers that stuff. But it's overplayed. I'm just going to be personal. It's not that I don't like the songs. The songs I love on this album now are the ones that are kind of the hidden tracks that keep on running. You don't hear too much. Still They Ride, Dead or Alive. Those songs I like a little bit better than the hits because, I mean, frankly, you hear the hits all the time. But it is a great album, obviously. You can't, rule it out as a top 3. And it's definitely one of my, it's got good memories. But for musicality, not my favorite. Now, we're going to get into the second album, and that, of course, is their debut album. I like this album a lot. I listen to it. I really do. I love it. The jamming is good. To me, this isn't a Journey album. If I put this on and no one knew, they didn't know, I put it on, they wouldn't know what it is. I'd say, oh, this is a prog rock band, Bozo Clowns. They wouldn't even know. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, they wouldn't know. This is not Journey. This is not. I mean, the drumming is awesome. The keyboard playing, the guitaring, the singing is pretty good too. It's just a really solid album. It's really, I think it's an underrated Journey album, and I think that a lot of people need to understand that this is the roots of the band, but it's overpowered by the Steve Perry days. Now for my number 1, and of course my number 1 is Departure. This to me is really the best of the old and the best of the new, with Steve Perry and Greg Rowley. This has got a lot of hits on it. Any Way You Want It, one of my favorite songs. Wherever You Were, I'm Crying, Line of Fire. I mean, the whole second side is just kick-ass. I mean, I love it. Homemade Love, Stay Alive. Great stuff. This album, I really, I think this is really, really where they were heading, because this is part prog and in part pop. This really is, to me, the indicative elements of Journey, the best parts, prog and rock. Okay, so let me recap real quick. Number 1, Departure. Number 2, Journey's first album, Journey. Number 3, Escape. Cool, love it, but again. Number 4 is Next from Journey. Again, like I told you, not bad. Number 5, Frontiers. Number 6, Infinity. Number 7, Evolution. These covers are so cool too. That's what I love about vinyl. Look at it, big giant covers. It's not like a little CD or it's on my phone. I mean, album. Cool. The way it should be enjoyed. Number 8, Into the Future. And last but not least, Raised on Radio. Okay, so that's my take on Journey. I really like them, and like I said, a cool band. But again, I try to give you a little story about them, more so than the surface stuff, and more than Don't Stop Believing and what we already know. So I hope you guys like this. Please give me a like and please subscribe. And again, this will be dropped on Max J Records for tomorrow, I think. And things will be going really well. And I'm going to be doing The Police too. I'm going to be doing a couple others. This week, I'm going to do The Police, which is a great discography. I'm going to cover all their albums and a little bit of history, just like this one, a little shorter. And then I'm going to do a feel-good music, kind of the music that we can do while we're at home listening to. I'm going to talk about some bands, different cool shit that I kind of like. And just do some commentary. So stay tuned. Look forward to it. And yes, hope you like my Journey talk. And you guys have comments, leave them. Again, subscribe, please. And give me some likes. And let me know what you guys think about Journey. Maybe you like the new stuff, or maybe you don't. Maybe you agree with me. Tell me what you think about my selections. All right? All right. I'll talk to you guys later, and I'll see you soon. Stay safe.